Hey folks, walk with me. Well, oh well, holy smokes, Tony Hinchcliffe. I don't know how familiar folks are with Tony. If you're watching this, you probably are, unless you're just sort of reeling in the aftermath. But Tony Hinchcliffe has a tremendously popular comedy show called Kill Tony, currently housed at Joe Rogan's mothership in Austin, Texas, and probably one of the, if not the, sort of premier comedy events or shows in present day. And he's like a roast master person, right? Like a writer, performer at roasts. And I say this just to say, for the chaos and the fallout that is just coming hard and fast at Tony Hinchcliffe, I don't feel as though it's his fault, in the sense of, yes, he said the things he said, but who in the world, maybe this part is his fault because this includes him, I suppose, but who in the world thought we should have somebody of sort of that mindset, that comedy roast mindset, at a political rally? Like, even if it's somebody as, different as Trump and the audiences that he secures, it's a weird mashing of worlds together, that, I don't know, if Tony Hinchcliffe couldn't pull it off, it seems like it's just a bad idea to have somebody of that ilk going the route of political rally. But in terms of like what he said, I mean, it's what you would expect, right? I don't know if anyone who is familiar with him would have seen it and been shocked or surprised that these are the things that he's saying. Again, not that I agree or think it was great that they were great things to say, but I don't know what anyone would have expected. So whoever thought that it was a great idea to put these two things together, it just seems just shockingly bad judgment at best, and at worst just like throwing yourself completely off the cliff in kind of the most shocking way. And it is like a solid week or more away from election day, so who knows how, like, the staying power that it has, right? The news cycle and the attention span is quite limited, and I think we shouldn't underestimate Trump's ability, and what do I want to say? It's not just he has an ability for this, but he has a particular mindset for it, where he knows when he needs to reclaim the news cycle. So it wouldn't surprise me if he does something or some things that are really surprising, really shocking, in order to just get the story off of Tony Hinchcliffe and the things that he said. But yeah, to me, this just looks like really dumb idea programming. And it is kind of crazy to think that Trump and his campaign, who just don't apologize for anything ever, put out this statement really quickly, trying to distance themselves. And I think they said that the remarks that Tony Hinchcliffe or maybe any of the other speakers were planning to make that night weren't reviewed. But I don't know that that goes a long way in restoring confidence from people who are really upset or put off by this. To me, it makes you look even more foolish to say, oh, well, there was all of these different speakers were a little more than a week out from election day, and we're just letting people go up there and speak without having any clue what they're gonna say. I mean, you know, give us the keys to the White House, please. It's like, you can't even program an event at Madison Square Garden and you're gonna ask for the keys to the country? I don't know. That statement and that response to me seemed almost as foolish as the reason that they had to put it out in the first place. But you know, it's funny also considering the sort of proximity in time to Trump being on Rogan. Because there's some sort of like coalescing of Rogan sphere around Trump at this point, which is an interesting thing to see. But that interview as well sort of gave me some questions. You know, there was like this moment where Trump's going on, we lost the election, then he like stops himself and he's like, well, we didn't actually lose. And Rogan's like, are you ever gonna come out and present that? You know, this happened 4 years ago, right? Are you ever gonna come out and present that or anything? And he just kind of like blows through it. And you know, obviously in that moment I had the thought of like, okay, there's a real start to a question. There's a real start to, I don't want to say pushback for pushback's sake, but this is one of the sort of cornerstone claims, right? And so probing it a little bit more and being like, are you ever gonna show anyone this stuff? It's been years and years and years. Maybe he has concepts of a steal, but he hasn't really fully formed the steal yet. So to me, that was an interesting moment for that reason. But also, I thought if Rogan does end up having VP Harris on, I was curious what the vibe or the tone and the difference in those things will be, if any. Because to me, much of that interaction felt a little fanboyish on Rogan's part. And you know, maybe that's unfair to say, but that's just what it sort of looked like to me. And so between that moment and letting him off the hook really quickly, right, and not sort of pressing further, whereas like even if it was, you know, one of the more recent Alex Jones shows on Joe Rogan, you know, I feel like he would have been more like, look it up, or, you know, stop right there. We're not moving on until we sort of face this one thing. So that was interesting. And yeah, I was just wondering, I was like, he has VP Harris on. Is this just gonna be so like very obviously more confrontational from the get-go? Or if there's something like that, you know, is there gonna be something that she tries to wiggle out of and he just like will not let it go, versus him very quickly letting this thing go with Trump? And the other two other things that stood out to me, one was the moment with the ear, and again felt, I mean, I haven't spoken about this, but I have had this sense from the beginning that had happened to the Democratic nominee, there would be endless reporting and speculation that was couched in the sense of confirmation, right, that it was totally staged, right? Especially when you have this moment of this like photo op and then selling merch branded with it. I mean, the right would have been just absolutely balls to the walls with this idea that whole thing was staged. It was meant to draw sympathy and rally support and get people to like get behind the person who had the great moment where they faced down the assassin and had this amazing photo and whatnot. I mean, it would still be going on nonstop today. And so for him to just like look at the ear and be like, oh, that healed up really well, huh? That moment looked to me like, I don't know if he was actually having a moment where it was like, where were you at? Is this what this is supposed to look like? But yeah, I just think if that were the Dem nominee, that there'd be all of these stories out there about how it was staged and everything, and release the medical report and, you know, so on and so forth. But instead, they just go with the miraculous healing and whatnot. And then the last one was, and this just seemed really crazy and dumb to me, but where Rogan was like, oh, the Republicans are the rebels these days. I'm like, rebels for what? Rebels for like getting the country in a situation where they repeal Roe versus Wade? Like, you know, is that what's rebellious about it? Like just taking away people's rights? Rebellious in the world of like gerrymander the hell out of everything? It just felt like, are you ever going to get over this obsession with this idea that like cancel culture is still like the top of the rung of the most important things that's happening, if it's even still happening at all? And this idea that like there's this woke mind virus nonsense that like, you know, Elon is just fixated on, I think, because he can't cope with one of his children being transgender. And he just, yeah, can't cope. And then both being upset that like lockdowns happened and da-da-da-da-da, but to a degree, some of that just seems like people were in a really screwed up situation, and I think that a lot of mistakes can be made with good intentions. And also, Trump was the president during that. What are you talking about? So, for him to be the savior of it all when he was the person in office, that's what drives me crazy about these things. That people just forget. He was the one in office. He's not the one who's coming to save you from the things that you're still upset about that happened while he was in office. Same thing with like releasing the Epstein list. Epstein died when Trump was in office. Did he do anything about it? Ghislaine was being tried when he was in office. Did he do anything other than send her well wishes about it? No. So why, all of a sudden, is he gonna come out and release the list? And it's just the mental gymnastics that have to happen to buy into those things is just, it's not sad, and it's not crazy, and it's damaging. It's damaging to a lot that goes beyond the individual who's spouting those things out. But we'll leave it at that. But I'm interested to see if any of this stuff impacts the election results. I mean, it would be wild if Tony Hinchcliffe comes from like being very well known in the comedy community, but outside of that bubble, being like, who? Right? Like I saw so many news reports that they had no clue how to pronounce his last name. And it just very quickly shakes you out of like, oh right, everyone's not like super entrenched in this world. But it would be wild if he comes from sort of like macro obscurity and loses Trump enough votes in battleground states where a lot of the people that he offended live, and it ended up actually mattering to the vote count and then the Electoral College. That would be wild. But time will tell, and I don't think that we'll know on November 5th, but we'll know soon enough. All right, folks, well, if you walked, we almost set a new record, coming up close to 15 minutes here, but I'm not going to prolong it just to make this the longest video that we've done on this playlist. So thanks a bunch for watching this far, and I will see you in the next video.